All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about something that's, kind of frustrating, but also fascinating about science. Why is it that the biggest, most game changing ideas, the ones that literally change the world, are almost always met with, well, a ton of resistance, sometimes even ridicule? We often picture science as this really clean, straight line of progress, right? Like one discovery just neatly stacks on top of the last one. But that's not the real story, not even close. The reality is, it's messy, it's chaotic, it's full of brilliant people being ignored and ideas being called crazy for years, sometimes decades, before everyone finally goes, oh, wait, they were right all along. So what's going on here? Well, there's a name for it: intellectual inertia. Think of it like this. An idea that's been around for a long time gets heavy. It has momentum. It's just easier to keep it moving in the same direction than to stop it and push it somewhere new. It's not some grand conspiracy. It's just human nature, really. Sticking with what we know feels a lot safer than embracing something that might just flip the whole table over. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by looking at the gatekeepers of science. Then we'll meet some of history's most famous scientific rebels. After that, we dive into this amazing story about a lost land called Doggerland. Seriously, it's incredible. And we'll wrap up by talking about what it actually takes to push these new ideas forward, and maybe how we can be a little less rigid. All right, first up, the gatekeepers of science. Let's dig into how the academic world, the very system that's supposed to champion new knowledge, can sometimes, well, get in its own way. So why do these new ideas hit a brick wall? Well, think about it. If you're a scholar, you've spent years, maybe your whole life, being trained in a very specific way of thinking. You become an expert in a particular framework. Then the whole peer review system, where other experts check your work, is made up of people trained in the exact same way. So of course they're going to favor ideas that fit the mold. And if you come along with something that challenges everything they've built their careers on, that's not just a new idea. It can feel like a threat. So what's the easiest path? Just ignore it. And look, this is absolutely not a new thing. The history books are just littered with stories of these scientific rebels, these brilliant people who were ahead of their time and got mocked, dismissed, or sometimes way worse, just for thinking outside the box. I mean, just look at this pattern across the centuries. You've got Galileo in 1633, literally forced to recant his idea that the Earth orbits the sun. Fast forward to 1912, Alfred Wegener comes along and says, hey, I think the continents are moving, and he's basically laughed out of the room. Then, just a year after that, Clement Reid proposes this idea of a whole submerged landscape, and gets nothing. Just crickets, silence. Let's stick with Alfred Wegener for a second, because his story is just a perfect example. His continental drift theory, it wasn't just debated, it was called pseudoscience. The top geologists of his day thought he was a crackpot. But today, his idea is literally the foundation of plate tectonics. It's chapter 1 in every geology textbook. The crazy idea became the new dogma. Okay, now for a story that's maybe a little less famous than Wegener's, but just as incredible. This is a modern case study in how a wild idea can be proven right decades later. We're talking about the lost land of Doggerland. So our story starts way back in 1913. There's this geologist, Clement Reid, and he publishes a book called Submerged Forests. And inside this book is a pretty radical idea, one based on stuff he was finding that he just couldn't explain any other way. What he proposed was just mind-blowing for the time. He suggested that there was once this vast, prehistoric landscape connecting Britain to mainland Europe, right where the North Sea is now. A whole lost world, teeming with life, that was eventually swallowed by the waves. We now call it Doggerland. And what did the academic community think of this amazing idea? Pretty much nothing. It was met with a deafening silence. His idea wasn't really even argued against. It was just ignored. It was too weird, too grand in scale. It just didn't fit into the neat little boxes of what archaeologists and geologists thought they knew. Plus, he wasn't exactly in the in crowd of archaeology. But here's where the story gets really good. For decades, Reid's idea was basically forgotten, a footnote in an old book. But then, technology caught up. In recent years, with advanced sonar mapping, we started getting these incredibly detailed pictures of the North Sea floor. And what did we find? You guessed it. Ancient river valleys, old coastlines, the outlines of a lost landscape. Everything Clement Reid had imagined a century earlier was actually there. He was right. So, a story like that really makes you think, doesn't it? What is it that actually drives these huge breakthroughs in science? It's not just about collecting more and more data, it's something else. It's about having the courage to imagine. Yeah, the real engine of progress is imagination. It's that ability to look at all the same facts everyone else has, but to see a completely different reality. It's the courage to ask those uncomfortable what-if questions. It's about being willing to picture a world that isn't in any of the current textbooks. And that's the key takeaway, really. A lot of the time, the evidence is already there. The clues are sitting right in plain sight, just like they were for Reid. The real roadblock isn't a lack of evidence. It's a lack of imagination. It's that spark that's needed to connect the dots in a way no one has before. So where does that leave us? Knowing this pattern exists, what do we do about it? How do we make sure the next brilliant, world-changing idea doesn't get ignored for 100 years? Well, maybe it means going back to basics, back to the absolute core principle of science, which is this. You test ideas against evidence, period. It shouldn't matter how strange the idea sounds or whether the person suggesting it is famous or a total unknown. Judge the idea, not its origin. And this leads to a really tricky question, right? It's a tough balancing act. On one hand, you absolutely need scientific consensus to build on what we know. But on the other hand, how do you do that without accidentally stamping out the curiosity and creativity of the rebels, the outsiders, the very people who often drive the biggest leaps forward? Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the real breakthroughs, the truly revolutionary ideas, they usually don't come from the safe, comfortable center of what's already known. They come from the fringes. They're found by the people who have the courage to venture out to the edges of the map and see what's there.